I wanted to take a minute today at the beginning of the podcast and say thank you to our sponsor, Huber Engineered Woods. Huber has actually been a sponsor of the podcast since 2020 when we decided to start this little endeavor. Without our sponsors, this content is probably not something that happens. But I think the best part about having Huber as a partner on this is it's an incredibly authentic alignment. Peter, Steve, and I all use Huber Woods. I've been using Advantech Subfloor for coming on probably 21 years now. I've been using Zip System and Zip System with the insulation on the back, the Zip R, since 2013. It's a system that I believe in. That systems approach where things play well together. They have design parameters that allow you to use their system for what you're working on. It works. Their tech support's there. Their knowledge is there. I've never had an issue with their product, and it's a great thing that they've decided to sponsor the podcast. So thank you, Huber Engineered Woods. Welcome to the Unbuild It podcast. I'm Jake Bruton. I'm joined today by Peter Yost.
Hey, Jake.
And today's main host of the podcast, Steve Basic.
Howdy.
I thought he was from Massachusetts.
Howdy.
Everybody likes to
see what I did there? Regionality. I'm using some regionality text.
Good lead-in.
And today's topic is going to be regionality, as you just alluded. And I think in our little pre-show conversation, we kind of all took a slightly different approach to this. We talked about a lot of different things. And then we all kind of just went, and we're going to let Steve take the lead on this one. So I'm going to
play the angry elf.
I'm going to immediately turn it over to the angry elf and let him be the one to guide the conversation, or at least start it off. So what are we going to talk about today, Steve?
Well,
Steven.
The availability of social media allows us to talk to a lot of people in a lot of different places, from over the ocean, across the country. And everybody seems to have their way of doing things. And it's real easy to sit there and say, wow, we do this, you guys should do that too. And it's real easy to do that in the region that they're in. And I'll give you an example. It's like Maine and Vermont and New Hampshire. It's pretty easy to find a local sawmill, get lumber from it, frame the house with lumber that was probably forested within 100 miles of that project.
Yep.
The builder, if you're an architect in one of those areas, you probably have one or two builders. Like, you could set up that system real easy, right? And then it's real easy to sit there and say, well, that's what everybody should be doing. But if you're an architect in Boston and you're doing a project in Phoenix, it might not be as easy to go down the street to the local sawmill and get a house full of 2x6s cut from Doug fir, because there's no Doug fir in Phoenix unless it's trucked in, right? Or Las Vegas, right? Those areas. So, I hear a lot of people say, well, you should do this, and they draw their lines in the sand. Well, in some respect, it's real easy to draw the line in the sand when your system is real easy and accessible. And that's kind of what we're talking about. The accessibility of a number of things. And again, we're down here in Texas. I come down here and do projects in Texas. Even if I spec a vented roof and say, let's put in 26 inches of cellulose in the attic, it's the same conversation. The general contractor is like, yeah, we can probably get cellulose down here. Nobody does it. We'd have to just find out how we can get it down here.
I know a guy in Dallas
that might be able to drive down. And then you get a number, and it's, $15K higher than spray foam. And it's like, yeah, okay, maybe we shouldn't be using spray foam. But in Texas, there's pretty much not an alternative, right? There might be some in some outlying areas. But again, somebody's going to write in and say, well, I'm in Amarillo, Texas. We do cellulose all the time. Okay, you have that one guy that can do it. And so the regionality, it's about the geography of where you're at, but it's also about the people and the workforce and the task force. And you can flip it. Down here, we can do a masonry job for probably close to the same price as we would do a wood siding job or a more elaborate siding. Go to New England and switch from a cedar clapboard to brick.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably 3x
Yeah.
to go to masonry. And people are like, oh my God, that brick's really expensive. Well, it is in some places.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing a
Or-
project in Indiana, and it's like, it's the same cost as brick, siding, hardy board, whatever. It's not far off.
Yeah.
My market fiber cement is the same cost as vinyl siding,
Yeah.
which people are
Really?
like, what? And it's like, yeah, nobody does vinyl.
Huh.
Fiber cement is king in my market, and it's just as cost. The labor is the savings there.
Well, and I'm sure you run into it. The minute lumber yards see that, right? Now they have one shelf of vinyl siding and they have 12 shelves
Yep.
or a building for cement siding.
Yep.
So, of course, if you're a builder now and you go to the homeowner and say, okay, we're going to side your project, what should we use? Well, the lumberyard carries, Hardy, James Hardy or Allura or whatever it is. And it's like, here's your 18 colors. And then you pick from those 18 colors, or you get the primed one and we'll paint it. But
So it's interesting that the internet and instant communication means that you can have the appearance of nothing about residential construction being regional, right? I saw it on the internet. I can do this brick at the drop of a hat when it comes down to supply,
and it's
which
probably,
is often region.
it's no surprise. I have an answer to all of my clients. I said, listen, we can do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest part is paying for it. Right. And that's what it comes down to. It's like, come down to Texas. I've had projects down here. We want to do a basement, put a rifle range in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can do that. But we had the Build Show Bill Boston house, and we were doing a comparable house. So I know the numbers. So the Build Show Bill Boston house, it was a little over 400 linear feet of foundation wall, and including the flat work and a 4-car garage. The number was probably like 125K for the foundation.
Mm.
The same foundation for a house of similar size here was almost 350.
Wow,
That's crazy.
gonna have to
Right.
really want that base.
And when I asked the GC, like, wow, I'm like, I mean, I can understand we don't do it that often, like 125 to 150 or 160, 125 to 350.
Yeah.
It's like, why? We just don't do them. And I think some of it is it's an easy way for the industry to push back,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And say, well, if you really want a basement, yeah, you're going to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the number. But we can do a slab, for a lot less expensive and just put your range above grade.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It is funny that I toured one of the projects here in town that has a basement, and we hauled this much gravel out of here, and it took this much concrete, and this is how long it took to work on this basement, and these are the things that, and it felt like they were so proud of the fact that they built a basement, and I was just like, oh, this might be the first basement that this company that's been around for 2 decades has done, and it was it very much was like they were patting themselves on the back, and I was just like, oh yeah, they don't do this. And it really is a unique thing. And like the regionality of this is what it is.
Yeah, and they're very proud of it. And meanwhile, I'm doing a project, on the shores of Massachusetts where we basically blasted the basement out, replaced it with crushed rock, put a foundation on in like 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Right. And the builder's like, yeah, it's just what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was no give me a blue ribbon or give me a big gold star.
Yeah.
It was like, that's what we do here.
Yeah, the idea of blasting for a basement, that's pretty common in New England where there's intermittent ledge.
And it's not, if we said we had to blast here, I'm sure it'd be like 100K. I mean, up there, a 3,000 square foot basement is probably 15K to blast,
Mhm.
right? It's like $100 a drilled hole. It's really not crazy money.
I looked at a set of plans for a builder, not in my market, not in a basement market. They're in a block foundation market. They do a lot of crawl spaces. And he said, hey, we don't do basements. We're going to have to hire a commercial company to come and do this basement. Can you take a look at this? And he showed me the set of plans, and it was a walkout living space in the basement. And I was looking at him and I said, the walkout wall, the third wall or the fourth wall that has all the windows and doors and everything in it. I was like, why are you pouring that in concrete? That should just be a frame wall. And he was like, really? It's a basement wall. And I was like,
he couldn't break out of that. It's got to be concrete.
It's not a basement wall. It's a above grade wall. Like the other 3 walls are basement walls.
Yeah.
He was like, what's going to keep those other walls from like,
yeah, don't they need the
and
fourth?
I was like, no.
Well, you mentioned CMU. 2 stories about CMU. We have a mutual friend just did a multi-million-dollar house with CMU. If I brought that basement crawl space to a builder in New England, they'd be like, I'm not building that crap.
Oh yeah.
CMU
you're
is
right.
crap.
Yeah.
And it's like you go down south.
Oh yeah, and in that market, all they do is
that's all they do. And there's all these CMU piers like on a 10-foot grid or 12-foot grid.
Yeah.
I look at that and go, oh my God, what a mess and
and they wouldn't consider doing it out of poured concrete.
No.
Never.
It's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And another one where we were doing a project and like the guy's drilling holes on the inside of the concrete block after the foundation was in. And I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, oh, that's just to drain the water out if it gets in. And I was like, really?
Weep holes.
And he's like, yeah, that's what we all do.
Yeah.
So I think that what we're talking about, this regionality is, and I said this recently and while I was giving a presentation, it's one of the things that we think that Toyota and Honda and Chevrolet, like that's what we want our industry to be. We want it to be cookie cutter. We want it to be a factory. We want everybody to have the same standards where we can deliver a great product to our clients where things don't leak and they work and they start every time you get in them and everybody gets the optimal comfort and all those things. But we're not building factory cookie cutter things. We're actually mom and pop restaurants around the corner.
Yeah.
Nationwide. And we all have similar ingredients delivered to the job or to our restaurant, but they're not the same ingredients nationwide. Some of us are buying from farmers markets. Some of us are buying from, nationwide chains.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason that when somebody wants to make a change in the industry, it's incredibly slow or it just doesn't happen.
But I'm going to give some positive light on this because I'm going to flip that. We're doing a project in, I'll just say nowhere, South Dakota. And there, like, it's heavily relying on a bunch of Sega products. And so I talked with ATN and the guys at Sega, and they're like, yeah, no problem. We can get that. And we're using their 700 MyVest, where when I showed that to builders in New England and talked to them, they're like, what's that? I never even heard of it. Mm-hmm. So here we are in nowhere, South Dakota, using products that I have never even seen in like mainstream New England, which is made in Switzerland, which is New England's really good for being a generator of innovation, new products and stuff coming out. Where I think
feeling like they're a generator.
Well, I think we're a little quicker to change our direction than say someone
in nowhere, South Dakota.
Somewhere in nowhere, South Dakota. But and the builder there is surprisingly like so excited to build this house. It's probably the coolest wall assembly I've ever drawn. And but the fact that we're using, again, something that got made in Europe and we're going to bring it there and use it, that the industry can do it. It's just, but like you said, it's like going to nowhere, South Dakota and having Ethiopian food, right? It's nothing different than that. They just find a way to bring that food in and someone's going to prepare it and do it. And hey, and I'm not picking on them. I just tried to pick something exotic.
Yeah.
But
we are very disjointed. And when it comes to like, oh, well, we have a nationwide code. Well, but we have very disjointed adoption. Yeah. And we have an even more disjointed enforcement.
So the regionality of codes, that's a very
challenging thing. And even like when, you and I presented last year in Minneapolis, and it was like, well, we can talk about what the IRC says, but Minnesota has its own code. And it's like, there's all those little nuances to how all this works. It's a really challenging environment to see where we are 10 years from now. I think.
Well, I don't know if it gets any different because the generations change, the problems remain. Right. I can sit here and say over the last 30 years, we're discussing things that we discussed 30 years ago at Building Science Corporation and some of the problems. But throw some gas on the fire. Let's talk a little bit about ICFs because somebody's going to post something saying, hey, let's talk about you should have done that in ICF. Oh, ICF is the way to go. Well, we priced out the Build Show Build Boston. And that foundation was 2.5x to move to ICF. And it's like, it just doesn't make sense. But yet I'm doing another project in further north, nowhere, South Dakota, where there's probably 3x the amount of cows than there is residents in this town. It's really interesting. One of these times I'll tell you the story of how I almost died up there.
I can tell you that story too. If anybody wants to pull me aside on something and ask,
wow, I've never heard
I'll gladly tell you that story. It's funny.
It was just stupid. It was I wasn't thinking. But anyways, up there,
that's a cliffhanger.
We had our concrete contractor for a house we're doing fall off the schedule because he had something else. I don't know, whatever. But the general contractor's like, yeah, we're just going to switch. We're going to do ICF. And I was like, oh. How about the price, though? He goes, yeah, it's pretty much the same price.
Wow.
And I was like, really? Like, you're up here in nowhere, South Dakota, and the price, there's no price difference. But in Boston, it's 2.5x. Right? So I don't.
In my market, it's 2x.
Yeah. It's 2x with probably about 2% of the industry can actually do it successfully too, right?
So regionality, we were just talking the other day with a couple people from the Build Show about mechanical systems. Like in our neck of the woods, the Northeast, you don't say plumbing without saying heating. I have a plumbing and heating business. And people down south are like, what's the connection there? Well, if you have all hydronic systems with boilers. Plumbing
or
and heating,
gas fitting for gas piping, oil.
Yeah,
not in my neck of the woods either. Plumbing and heating don't go together in my neck of the woods.
But it's a regionality thing. That skill is connected, and materials are available for that because that's the way things are done based on climate and tradition.
I've worked on 2 houses that have boilers in my career.
Yeah.
From this perspective, it looked like you were giving Peter a finger.
It did kind of, because like, I was holding up 2 fingers, right there, but you're sitting on my right. It does look like I'm giving Peter the finger. Normally when I give Peter the finger, it's with both hands in anger.
Yeah, but so it's all based on how the mechanical systems have sort of evolved. But does that mean that you can't do a ground source heat pump in some areas of the country?
Yeah, I mean, there's places we've attempted to potentially do them down here in Texas, and there's few and far between. Where in the Boston area, there's probably a dozen companies that do ground source heating systems and cooling systems.
I in 8 to 10 years of doing remodeling and new construction in New England, it wasn't until I went down to the NHP Research Center that I think I had worked on one forced air system in a building before I got to the Mid-Atlantic. And everything is forced air once you get into air conditioning country.
I mean, I could still remember some of my earlier projects. We didn't have air conditioning, and there was a boiler going to baseboard heating in New England.
Man, you guys are old.
Well,
both of you.
I want to introduce, it's not really regionality, but it's a description of our industry. The difference between typical residential construction and typical commercial construction. It's like they're completely 2 different worlds, not only when it comes to who works in them, but the materials that are supplied, the systems that are used. There just isn't a whole lot of crossover there.
I think it's certainly improving.
Yes.
30 years ago, or when we were at Building Science, they were too definitive. They both had their distribution lines.
Yes.
Everything was separate. But now, I think you can go to Home Depot and even find like a more commercialized material. The manufacturers are realizing, hey, we've isolated this sector. We can, instead of making this big buckets of stuff, let's make some smaller buckets of stuff, and we can sell it to the residential industry. Yeah. The residential industry, the builders like Jake are sitting there realizing, well, waterproofing, I mean, they have this really cool system that they do commercial below grade parking garages and it works well. Let me see if I can't get access to that and use it on our basement.
I can't believe you're saying that, because when I did the wingnut stuff on testing negative side waterproofing, which is the crystalline, I was told by a concrete supplier in concrete materials down in New Haven, Connecticut. And he said, Koster, Zypex, they don't sell to the general public. They only sell to, licensed contractors that are doing that work. And it's mostly on the construction, commercial side of the business. Literally last week, I was advising a guy on solving some water systems before he sold a house in our neighborhood. And I said, you probably could use the Koster or the Zypex system, but it's not available retail. And he comes back the next day and he says, isn't this what you're talking about? And it's commercially available on the internet.
Uh-huh.
He can buy a 150-pound bag. It was really expensive, but that material is available to a DIY, much less the residential side of the industry, just because how the internet has changed supply and demand.
My favorite is one of the first times I heard Joe speak. He was like, Mother Nature doesn't care what the building's use is. Mm. She doesn't know that it's a commercial building.
Yeah.
She doesn't know that it's a residential building.
Yeah, the physics aren't a whole lot
Which
different.
is like 100%. Like, why do we make that dumb distinction?
It should just be construction products and not residential construction projects or commercial. It's like, here's a waterproofing.
Yeah.
If you can use it.
So is a takeaway that some stuff is just because the construction industry at its core was very regional. You did brick veneer where there was brick available. But the internet is, I think, really changing concepts of sort of divisions within supply and demand.
It is, but you also have to be aware of that's part of it. Like, you can't just say, oh, we saw that online, or we heard Peter say that online, and so that it works where I live.
Yeah.
Well, that's a whole, we probably do an episode on that, but I have clients that's like, hey, Steve, I was reading about this siding last night. And it's like, okay, now I got to spend 2 hours, go on the website and figure out what are they talking about.
Yeah.
And it's like, it just takes up so much time because they think, and they're like, oh, they say they ship anywhere in the US. Yes, I've heard that all the time until we call them. And it's like, well, we can probably get it up there. There's going to be an extra charge because we'll have to direct ship it.
It could be 8 to 10 weeks.
It could be 8 to 10 weeks. And it's like, there's always a song and dance that comes with that music. So, But anyways, are we done?
How does it take 8 to 10 weeks to get anything across the United States at this point? I don't understand that.
The only thing I can think is if it's going by train.
Because there's probably 8 or 10 people with their hand out that have to get paid before they move it to the next hand.
We should talk about real quick. I have had maybe 5 times in the last 10 years redwood siding come up. Redwood was quite available until maybe 95 in our market. Like, I remember working with redwood and putting
Can't believe you're going to want to cut down those beautiful redwood trees.
I didn't cut them down. Somebody else did. All I did was use a durable material for my clients.
Poor brown bears of the Northwest. They're losing their redwood forest because Jake's got to have redwood siding.
Where are we going with this?
And your comment about, well, it's ships nationally. The last time we had to get it, the lumberyard was like, yeah, we can't get it at all. And I found it online and I called and the lady was like, yeah, we can ship to you. And literally F-250 with a gooseneck behind it pulled up to our house.
Seriously.
And I was like,
yeah, there's all these little shipping companies. You ever watch it on?
And it was
like
channel
or something.
$1,800 in shipping. The guy literally drove from Washington
because they bid on it. There's like 5 or 6 of them. They bid on it. They get the bid. They go pick it up and drive it.
He drove from Washington.
Uber. It's Uber for materials.
Yeah. So we are saying
hot shot is what they call it. Like
the regionality is changed completely, and that's based on the internet, right?
Yeah.
The fact that you could make those connections in a relatively inexpensive way, and then they could figure out how to meet that. Who knows? Maybe you're going to get your redwood by drone. They're going to come and drop it right on top of your house.
Yeah.
Now you're dreaming. But anyways, are we done?
I believe so.
The regionality of the construction industry is evaporating in front of our very eyes.
You know what's really interesting to me? I come here and host a podcast, and it appears I have a very good sense of direction. The other day, my wife comes up to me and says, you have absolutely no sense of direction. And I said, where did that come from?
Yep.
That's what he was waiting for.
Yeah.
All this about regionality. Oh, man. I should have seen it coming.
Well, there you have it. 3 guys doing a little bit of talking about a big old topic.
Thank you for listening today. If you have questions or comments, questions at Unbuild It Podcast. And until next time, have a good day.
Bye-bye.
See ya.